kitchen smelled like cinnamon and roasted squash, the way it always does on my daughter's birthday in October. I'd been up since 6 that morning making her favourite butternut squash soup from scratch, the recipe my mother passed down to me in a handwritten card I still keep in the drawer beside the stove. Mia had driven 4 hours from Ottawa just to be there. My son-in-law had taken a half-day off work. My mother-in-law, who was 73 and didn't travel easily anymore, had taken the train from Kingston. I'd set the dining room table with the good dishes, the ones we only brought out for actual occasions, and I remember standing back and thinking, this is what I work for. This exact thing. My husband walked in from the garage around 5, still in his work jacket, and said he was glad everyone was there because he had something to share. I assumed he'd gotten a promotion. I went back to the soup. My name is Claire, and I'm 41 years old, and for 19 years I thought I understood the life I was living. I met my husband when I was 22 at a mutual friend's housewarming party in Mississauga. He was charming in a quiet way, not the guy working the room, but the one in the corner actually listening when you talked. I thought that meant something. For a long time I think it did. We moved to Burlington when Mia was 3 because the school catchments were good and the commute to Hamilton was manageable. I went back to work part-time when she started grade 1, teaching ESL at a community centre. Not glamorous, but I was good at it and it was mine. My husband built up a career in commercial real estate. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. We had a house with a backyard, a dog named Fig, a daughter who turned out better than either of us deserved credit for. I'm telling you all of this because I need you to understand exactly what was sitting at that table on Mia's 32nd birthday when my husband stood up and said what he said. "I've been seeing someone," he said, and the room went very quiet. My mother-in-law set down her wine glass. Mia stopped mid-sentence. She'd been telling a story about something that happened at her office, something funny, and she just stopped. I turned from the stove. He didn't look at me. He was looking at the centerpiece. Or maybe past it. His jaw was set the way it gets when he's already decided something and is just waiting for the formality of saying it out loud to be finished. "Her name is Andrea," he continued, "and she has 2 kids, a boy and a girl, 7 and 9. They're in a 2-bedroom apartment right now, and it's not enough space. So I've been thinking." He cleared his throat. "I think we should list the house. My half of the equity would cover the down payment on something bigger, somewhere we could all actually—" "Dad." Mia's voice was flat. I'd never heard it like that before. "Stop talking. I know this is." I said stop. He stopped. I stood in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in my hands and I felt something very strange happen inside my chest. Not the shattering I would have expected, more like a door closing. Very cleanly. Very finally. I should tell you what I already knew. I'd known about Andrea for 7 months. I want to be honest about that, because the part that comes later only makes sense if you know I didn't find out that night at the dinner table. I found out in March, on a Tuesday, when I borrowed my husband's laptop to print a boarding pass and saw the conversation sitting open in his email. Not hidden, not deleted. Just open, the way you leave something open when you've stopped thinking about whether someone might see it. That's the part that hurt more than the content. The carelessness. I closed the laptop and I went to work and I taught my Tuesday afternoon class, and afterward I sat in my car in the parking lot of the community centre for 45 minutes. I didn't cry. I made a list in my head of what I knew, what I didn't know, and what I needed to find out. Then I went home and made dinner and didn't say anything. I spent the next 3 weeks researching, which is not a dramatic word, but it is the accurate one. I read everything I could find about Ontario family law, about matrimonial home designation, about the rights of a non-titled spouse. I want to pause here and be clear about something, because I know the question will come up. The house was in both our names. Had been since we bought it. That matters to this story, but not in the way you might think. What I found out was this: under Ontario's Family Law Act, a matrimonial home, any property both spouses ordinarily occupy, cannot be sold, mortgaged, or otherwise dealt with by one spouse without the written consent of the other. It doesn't matter whose name is on the title. It doesn't matter whose income paid the mortgage. If it is the home you both live in, neither spouse can force a sale unilaterally. He could not sell without my signature. He had apparently not thought about that. Or he had, and assumed I wouldn't know enough to push back. I went and saw a family lawyer in April. Her name was Sandra, and she was small and brisk and had the energy of someone who had heard every version of this story and was not impressed by any of them. She confirmed everything I'd read. She also walked me through what a separation would look like. Assets, support, pension entitlement, the works. I left her office 2 hours later with a folder full of notes and a second appointment booked for May. By the night of Mia's birthday, I had consulted Sandra 4 times. I had documentation. I had a clear picture of my legal position. I had, folded in a white envelope that I'd put in my cardigan pocket that afternoon, a letter she had helped me draft. Not a legal document exactly, more of a plain English summary of the facts, reviewed for accuracy. It explained that the house was a matrimonial home under Ontario law, that my written consent was required for any sale, that I was not providing that consent, that I had retained legal counsel, that if you wished to proceed with the separation, I was prepared to do so through proper channels, and that I had documentation of the financial contributions I had made over the course of the marriage, including the $40,000 from my parents' estate that had gone into the original down payment and that I had never been compensated for. It was not aggressive. It was not emotional. It was just the truth, in clean paragraphs with a lawyer's name at the bottom. I had been carrying it in my pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Not to be dramatic, because I needed to be in a place where I was calm enough to hand it over without my hands shaking. After my husband stopped talking, Mia's husband, Thomas, quietly took the wine glasses into the kitchen. He didn't say anything. He's not a man who fills silence with noise, which is one of the things I've always liked about him. My mother-in-law, Beverly, excused herself to the powder room and did not come back for some time. Mia sat at the table across from her father with her arms crossed and looked at him in a way I had never seen before and hope I never have to see again. "How long?" she asked. "Mia, how long, Dad?" He said 14 months. I watched Mia's face do something very complicated and then go very still. I walked to the table. I sat down. I took the envelope out of my cardigan pocket and set it on the table in front of him. "Since you're making announcements," I said, "here's one of mine." He looked at the envelope. He looked at me. "What is this?" "Open it." He picked it up. He opened it. He read it. I watched his face change the way weather changes, not all at once but in layers, the first clouds moving in before the temperature drops. He looked up. "You can't." "I can, and I have," I said. "Read the second paragraph again." He read it again. "You've been talking to a lawyer since April." The silence in that room was extraordinary. Mia was watching her father with an expression I can only describe as archaeological, like she was sifting through 19 years of dinners and school plays and family road trips and trying to locate the moment the layer changed. "I built this house with you," he said, and I could hear something in his voice that wanted to be anger but couldn't quite get there. "This is our home." "It is," I said, "which is exactly why you can't sell it without asking me." I want to be honest about the next part because I think it's the part that's easiest to get wrong when you're telling a story like this. It would be tidy to say I felt triumphant, vindicated, like everything snapped into place. That's not exactly what happened. Mia started crying at the table. Not the loud kind, the quiet, private kind, where she pressed her lips together and stared at the ceiling, and I could see her trying to decide whether she was going to hold it together or not. Her father reached across the table and she moved her hand away. That small movement, that 1 inch of withdrawal, broke something open in me that I'm still not entirely sure how to talk about. Beverly came out of the powder room and took one look at the table and went to stand behind me. She didn't say anything. She just put her hand on my shoulder and left it there. She has never, in 19 years, been demonstrably on my side over her sons in any conflict. That moment mattered more to me than almost anything else that happened that night. My husband sat with the letter in his hands for a long time. Eventually he said, "I didn't realize you'd done all this." "I know," I said. "That's rather the point." He moved out in November, into a sublet in Hamilton. He retained his own lawyer, which I had expected, and the process of separating our finances formally began. I'm not going to walk through all of it because it was long, and it was exhausting, and most of the details are not mine alone to share. What I can tell you is that we reached an agreement without going to court, which Sandra told me was fortunate, and which I attribute largely to the fact that my documentation was thorough, and my husband, when faced with the actual inventory of what I'd contributed, had very little ground to contest. The house went on the market in February as part of the settlement which we agreed to jointly. From my share, I put a down payment on a townhouse in Oakville, 20 minutes away. It has a small garden in the back, and enough room for Mia and Thomas when they visit, and a second bedroom I use as an office. The ESL program offered me more hours, and I took them. As for Andrea, I found out in January through a mutual acquaintance that she and my husband had ended things sometime in the late fall. I don't know the details. I didn't look for them. I'm telling you only because people always want to know, and I think the honest version of this story includes the fact that his departure cost him more than he was calculating at the dinner table in October. In March, Mia called to tell me she was pregnant, due in September, a girl, and they were thinking about names. She called me first. She said she wanted me to know before she told anyone else. I was sitting in my kitchen in the townhouse, a mug of tea going cold beside me, looking out at the garden where I'd planted a row of tulip bulbs in the fall on a kind of optimistic impulse, and I could see the first green tips just starting to push through the soil. She asked me if I was okay, not in the performative way, in the Mia way, which is direct and a little scary and means she actually wants the real answer. I told her I was better than okay. I told her I was learning what okay could mean when you built it yourself, from what was actually there instead of what you'd been hoping was there. I told her I was looking forward to meeting her daughter. "Good name, by the way," she said. "Claire." I laughed. It was the first real laugh in a long time, the kind that comes from somewhere honest. And it surprised me a little. I told her I'd already thought of that. There's a tulip bulb in the ground for months before anyone sees it do anything. You plant it in the fall, in cold soil, and then nothing happens. At least nothing you can see. And yet, something is happening. That's what I think about now when I try to make sense of what my life looked like from March to October of that year. People ask me sometimes whether I regret not confronting my husband sooner. Whether staying quiet for 7 months was a kind of weakness. I've thought about that a lot, and I don't think it was. I think there's a version of integrity that looks like stillness from the outside. That's what those months were for me, not passivity, not denial, but something closer to deciding what kind of person I wanted to be when it mattered. I could have screamed at him in March when I saw that email. I could have broken things. Part of me wanted to. But I knew, somewhere that wasn't grief yet, that screaming wouldn't protect me. Understanding my actual position would. So I learned. I read the Family Law Act at my kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night. I called Sandra's office on a Wednesday morning and made an appointment I was terrified to keep. I showed up anyway. I took notes. I went back 4 times. None of that felt brave while I was doing it. It felt like the only thing I could do that wasn't falling apart. What my husband didn't understand, sitting at that birthday table, was that he was counting on a version of me that no longer existed. The woman who would be too stunned to respond, Too hurt to have prepared. Too dependent to have options. He'd been building his exit for over a year, and somewhere in that time he'd stopped paying attention to who I actually was. That's a particular kind of carelessness, and I think it cost him more than he ever anticipated. I'm not saying this to be unkind, I'm saying it because I think the outcome of that night was the direct result of choices, his and mine both. His choice to deceive, and then to assume his plan would go unchallenged, my choice to not let grief make me helpless, to use the time I had to actually understand what I was entitled to and what I was capable of. Mia standing up from that table. Beverly's hand on my shoulder. Those things happened because the people in that room had to make a choice about what they valued in real time with no preparation. Character shows up like that, not in the moments you rehearse, but in the ones you don't. I'm not the same person I was before that March Tuesday. I don't think I'd go back even if I could. There's something clarifying about a season that strips everything down to what's actually true. I know what I'm made of now in a way I didn't before. I know I can sit with hard information and not collapse. I know I can build something new from what remains. The tulips came up in April. All of them.